Hello, and welcome to Team 4's presentation on Singapore.
Welcome to Team Four's um, report on Singapore. I hope you enjoy the presentation. So to start it off, just a little bit of country background. So the Republic of Singapore is located in Southeast Asia, and it's an island located about 85 miles north of the equator. So it's bordered by Malaysia and Indonesia. So this island country has one of the busiest ports in the whole wide world. The capital city of the Republic of Singapore is Singapore. Singapore is a unitary parliamentary democracy based on the Westminster model. So the president is the head of state. Until 1991, the largely ceremonial post of president was filled by the parliamentary election. But in that same year, the Constitution was amended to allow the direct popular election of the president and for presidential powers to be expanded. The unicameral parliament consists of 94 members, of whom 84 are elected and 10 are appointed to terms of up to 5 years. Halima Yacob is the current president of the Unitary Multi-Party Republic. Lee Hsien is the current prime minister. Singapore has almost 5.5 million citizens and 4 official languages, which consists of Mandarin Chinese, Malay, English, and Tamil. Singapore has the most advanced economy in Southeast Asia and is often mentioned along with the rapidly industrializing countries in Asia, notably South Korea and Taiwan. Singapore's economy always has differed from those of the other Southeast Asian countries in that it has never been primarily dependent on the production and export of commodities. Next slide.
All right, so I'm Ryan, and I will now be taking us into the business practices section. So as far as ethnic groups, the people of Singapore self-identify into 4 categories. We have the Chinese, the Malay, which does also include the Malays and the Indonesians, Indian, including Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, and Sri Lankan, and other ethnic groups. Chinese accounts for 74.3% of the population, while Malay accounts for 13.4%. Indian is 9%, and the others, which is a combination of Eurasians, Caucasians, Japanese, and Filipino, and Vietnamese, makes up the last 3.2% of the population. Due to this diversity, according to the CIA fact book, English, Mandarin, Malay, and Tamil are all observed as official languages, with 36.9%, 34.9%, 10.7%, and 3.3% of the population speaking each respectively. And as far as local languages, other Chinese dialects including Hokkien, Cantonese, Teochew, and Hakka account for 12.2% of the population, with the remaining 2% comprised of other languages. Now, children in Singapore have a pretty good school life expectancy. In fact, it's 16 years. Males have an expectancy of 16 years, and females have a school life expectancy of 17 years. But this long time in school shows why Singapore has such a great literacy rate. Literacy is again defined as the percentage of the population that can read and write by age 15, and Singapore has a literacy rate of 97.3%. Fantastic. Males have a 98.9% and females have a 95.9%. So let's talk about the average work week now. According to a report by Just Landed, Singapore has a high standard of living with a low unemployment rate that often leads to a rewarding and lucrative business experience. As English is the dominant language in Singapore, American businesses will find it very easy to adapt to the Asian country and hit the ground running. Normal office hours in Singapore are not dissimilar from Western norms. The week runs Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. with a lunch break between 1 to 2 p.m. Saturdays is often a half day, and this typically runs 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., but the work week is capped at 44 hours a week by the government. It does have 11 public holidays and 8 major festivals that it celebrates throughout the year, and overtime is available for the average worker. In fact, employees can work overtime, but they are restricted from working more than 12 hours a day by the Singapore government. There are special circumstances where workers can work longer, such as an accident or a threat of an accident, work that is essential to the life of the community, um, whether that be national defense or security. And finally, there could be unforeseeable interruptions that allow for workers to continue working as maybe a job needs to get done. All employees are also guaranteed at least 1 day of rest per week by the government. Now, just for some fun facts for you here, the Singapore dollar is the monetary standard in Singapore. This is its symbol. It's just an S with a dollar sign. The exchange rate in Singapore is actually 0.70 United States dollars to the Singapore dollar, which is actually pretty good. And then the time zone that it exists in is the Singapore time zone, placing it 8 hours ahead of Greenwich Mean Time, and it does not follow daylight savings time.
So, for the competitiveness of Singapore, Singapore is very competitive. Singapore is a leader in exports. There is $396.8 billion roughly each year in exports. The imports is lower, coming in at $312.1 billion. The gross domestic product, or GDP, was high. Per the World Factbook, it said that it came in at $94,100, and there's a very low unemployment rate in Singapore. Continuing on with the competitiveness of Singapore, the population is around 6,200,000 people that are highly literate. According to the World Factbook 2020, there was about 97.3% literacy rate, and that's about 6,032,600 people. For the ethnicity in Singapore, it was primarily Chinese, coming in at 74.3%, or 4,606,600 people out of 6.2 million. Malay, 13.4% at 830,800 out of 6.2 million. The Indian ethnicity population was at 9%, 558,000 out of 6.2 million, and a combination of other at 3.2% at about 198,400 out of 6.2 million. And these numbers were looking at the 2017-2018 time frame for the information on the World Factbook. Singapore is known as a telecommunications leader, and it said on there that it may or may not be the first area to be labeled or deemed as a smart nation. Singapore has a very large fishing industry and has a lot of square miles of water access. So the infrastructure of Singapore allows it to be highly competitive with the exports, particularly in the fishing industry.
Singapore's healthcare has them ranked at the top 10 in the world. They rank 6 as opposed to the US at 37. They run a tier system for care and coverage. Lead and first choice is usually paid out of pocket, while the last resort at the 5th tier system has 80% covered by the government. The 5 classes of coverage are A, B1, B2, B2 plus, and C coverage. There are about 2.2 specialists per 1,000 patients. 55-year-old people place about 20% of their own earnings into health coverage. and an additional 17% is to be added by employers. In the midst of 2006 to 2016, there are about 3,200 acute medical care beds in Singapore, while there are 1,050 in the community settings, and roughly there's about 2.1 to 2.5 for every 1,000 patients. UK's comparison, which is CloseNet at 2.6 for every 1,000, and then the US was ranked during 2006 to 2016 to have 2.8 for every 1,000 patients. I'll go ahead and pass it on.